in many countries. We live
Yeah.
in the villains are smiling villains, and they do things in a way which doesn't allow us to feel that any bad has been done. And that was again where we wanted to take on Napoleon, and therefore casting Seth Rogen to play, I
Oh,
mean, Napoleon in the book is a brutish, silent dictator.
yes.
Well, yes, of course, there are world leaders who are like that, but more and more we're living in a society where the brutality is done with a smiling face.
I was thrilled that you wanted to do something with Animal Farm. It is such a classic piece of literature, never more meaningful than it is today. I'd love to know when the first time you picked that beautiful book off a shelf was. How old were you, and what impact did it have on you?
I can remember exactly. I was about 12 years old
Yeah.
and I read it on the 273 bus going to school, leaving from Ruislip, and it absolutely left an indelible mark on me because I just felt I felt incredibly sorry and emotional for these animals who had created a brand new way of existing,
Yeah.
and it all goes horribly wrong. And it's really stayed with me. It was one of those books that just really wouldn't let me go. And I then years later saw a theatrical production of it at the National Theatre with actors playing, actors playing with short crutches, being pigs, and I was fascinated to see a stage adaptation. And then years later, I found myself when acting using performance capture, playing a chimpanzee and free leading a rebellion against um,
Yes.
and leading apes to freedom.
Yes.
Caesar in the first Planet of the Apes
Of
movie,
course.
and I suddenly just pinged that there hadn't been a recent adaptation of Animal Farm, and I remember how much it had really left its mark on me, as you say, and so we immediately started to think about the possibility of turning it into a movie.
The beautiful thing about this book and the cleverness of Orwell is that it really lands for young people. You said you were 12 years old. It's a perfect age to read a book like this because you're ready for more. You're ready to go beyond the Secret Seven and into the world of adulthood or what have you. Um, and it's just the cleverness of casting the animals. And like you say, you're no stranger to playing, whether it's Gollum or Caesar. You responded to that as a young boy. It's exquisite storytelling, isn't it?
It really is because again, it has this innocence,
Yeah.
and when you see that innocence being corrupted, for me, I just find it unbearable. And when we started to work on the script for this,
Yeah.
and when we decided, I mean, we were going to make a live action movie with performance capture, but it would have been a much darker film. And then I suddenly thought, well, Jonathan, my partner, my business partner, Jonathan Cavendish, producer, we just said, look, we want to make this for as broad an audience as possible, and for to really the thing about Orwell is he's brilliant at starting debates, and all sorts of people claim Orwell, as you probably well know. He's not he's not pro anything. He's anti. He's always anti, and so but this is very much about anti-authoritarianism, and that's the world that we find ourselves in all different guises. We find, and we're living it, whether it's through, oppressive regimes who directly quell freedom of speech, or whether it's through controlling regimes who very cleverly manipulate the media. It's across the spectrum. I think one of the things that we wanted to do is to find a clever way, but a funny and entertaining way of bringing an entire family together to kind of go, this is where we're at the moment. And Orwell's book is as relevant now as it was 80 years ago when he was talking about totalitarian Russia.
Yes, indeed. I remember some fellas and girls I used to know in university, and they would be flying the red flag, and then 10 years later, they're of course, corporate head of some petroleum company. And I often say, every pig wants to be a farmer, right? So there's a bit of that about the world. You landed on the animation of this, so your version of it, and in it what I find quite intriguing was there's a cuteness to it, but it's got to be dark too.
Well, it does, and it is, but it's not. It isn't kind of. We made the decision not to be graphically violent. I mean, in the book there are some extremely violent passages. The chickens get torn to shreds by the dogs who are the guard dogs who are the kind of the Stasi, if you like, or the police force any political regime. And you get that darkness. We didn't want to do that for this audience. We wanted to have Snowball when Snowball, again, who is executed in the book, basically. We wanted Snowball to be gently escorted to the edge of the farm by two very violent looking dogs, because that's the violence that we live in now. In many countries, we live
Yeah.
in the villains are smiling villains, and they do things in a way which doesn't allow us to feel that any bad has been done. And that was again where we wanted to take on Napoleon, and therefore casting Seth Rogen to play, I mean, Napoleon in the book is a brutish, silent dictator.
Yes.
Well, yes, of course, there are world leaders who are like that, but more and more we're living in a society where the brutality is done with a smiling face, and that is where we wanted to do this, and but also make him funny. So the young protagonist in our story, which is again a piglet who once thought of himself as an animal, but now sees himself, as a pig as life goes on, and separates himself from all the rest of the species of animals who are his friends,
Yeah.
because he becomes corrupted by this by Napoleon, this avuncular, funny, charming, narcissistic. We
Yeah.
don't need to look too far to see how many leaders are like that in the world now.
Yeah.
So that was that we would definitely wanted an innocent corrupted in our
Yeah.
story, and that was why we went with that particular version of to hang on to, really, as driving force through the middle of the story.
Of course. I was watching it. As I was watching, I was thinking, if I often find myself thinking, if I was a school teacher, I would, you'd take kids to a museum, or you take them to, outside the classroom. But I would show them this film. I think this would be a really good film to show kids in schools, to start a debate, to get them thinking, to get them beyond the whatever computer they're looking at, to discuss who we are, society, history, everything, politics.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing. We really, in our mind's eye, Jonathan Cavendish and I, and Aniventure, the animation company, all sat down and went, look, ideally, who's this for? It's for kids to sit down with their parents and their grandparents,
Yes.
and each generation gets something out of this, and have a collective sort of chat about it afterwards, and kind of, we end our version of this, not where Orwell leaves it, which is totally bleak, and as you will remember because you're a fan of the book, the animals outside watching the pigs and men and not being able to tell which is
Yeah.
which.
Yeah.
And it's such a bleak ending, and we felt, no, we need to ask the question, okay, history has repeated itself. Animals have been no better, or pigs rather, have been no better leaders than humans. If young audience members, if you were to inherit the earth, what would you do with it? And so it opens up a question and opens up responsibility to young people, which is, I think, what we ought to be doing more.
Your extraordinary work in Lord of the Rings, and we come from a big Planet of the Apes family here. You'd be kind of weirded out to know. So much so that the women in my life kind of fancy Caesar, which really disturbs me. But what am I to tell them, Andy?
Well, I have to say, I think I actually sort of all the characters I've ever played, I think Caesar, in a way, I'm not saying I've fallen in love with the character that I played, but I do really think he's a great example of a leader that listens. And I think all world leaders should be like Caesar, because he does see both sides. He was brought up as a human being. He understands humanity. He is a chimpanzee. He understands what it is to be an ape. And it's this empathy that he has, which makes him such a kind of stoic and rather wonderful example of what leadership should be about, which is to be able to listen. And so many leaders can't do that these days.
No, I mean it is extraordinary. I'm just reading Robert Harris's new book, Agrippa, and again we're back in ancient Rome, and that's largely about Augustus Caesar, who's of course the heir to Julius, and you're just thinking, as you describe it there, the world, yes, he's battle hardened, but he's got a certain empathy and a certain and again kind of a benign madness, but certainly benign.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we really are in a world where, country, and that's the other thing. Sorry, just to,
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
slightly, but this was never intended to be sort of partisan politically. Our version isn't popping at anyone in particular. It's much more. The themes of Orwell are, still remain intact.
Yeah.
About corruption, about misinformation and disinformation, the animals being lied to on a grand scale, and turning all of their tenets of belief on their heads, and power and absolute power corrupting absolutely, and those are the things that are happening all around the world. And I think if any country or children in any country across the world saw this film, they would they would get it
Yeah.
and understand. So
Yeah.
it's not, I just wanted to make that clear because some people think we're being very specifically targeting to a certain, prime minister
I
or
understand.
a certain
No, but
world leader.
no, but as you were riffing there, I was thinking, a new regime comes in to say Downing Street, whatever. Within about a year, people say you're as bad as the last lot, and that's Animal Farm.
100%, 100%. I mean, and often it is because it's almost out of. Yeah, there are no straightforward answers, and
No,
but it is about listening to the people who have put you in power. Not once you have power, then you stop listening and you do things which only you think are right, and that is absolutely what is at the core of this version, I think.
and allegory, this is one of the things that you've just mastered in your role as whether it's an actor or as somebody who's bringing other creatures, if you will, to life. And I'm laughing thinking of Count Binface and how British he is. What a British phenomenon that somebody so ludicrous could, not that he's going to pose a threat, but has dominated the press for so long. There's a madness in the British psyche, isn't there?
There is a madness in.
Absurdism, an absurdism.
Yes, yes, it's true. And that, and in a way, that sort of absurdist sort of, I mean, that absurdism is something that Orwell is brilliant
Yeah,
at commenting on. I mean, he's fantastic at picking it up on that. And I mean, Tolkien would never describe himself as an allegorical writer. He created worlds, and he was absolutely adamant that he didn't talk about that. He was not comparing his worlds to as a commentary on the world that we live in, and he was very outspoken about that. But I mean but I do believe that allegory is, personally, I really believe it's the only way that we're going to solve things.
yeah.
And storytelling and the myths and all of the mythologies that go around with all the popular cultures and popular, Star Wars through to the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
It's his about trying in some way to understand how things can be better.
And
And
and this is what as you're talking, I'm thinking of Narnia, C.S. Lewis. Of course, there's a lion, there's Aslan. And we talked about Planet of the Apes, and there's Caesar. We talk about Animal Farm. We finish our conversation now talking about Animal Farm because that's where we begin and that's why we're here. Animals play a key role, weirdly, in telling the story of where we're going wrong.
Absolutely, because not only do we and have we sort of made hundreds of species extinct, or disrespected them and experimented on them, and for whatever you think of that, we've I mean, we choose the ones we like, and they become our pets. And then but then equally, we're very happy to treat others in a very poor way. They do constantly for me, anthropomorphization has been a huge tool as an actor for being able to communicate that sense, those human sentiment, human emotion, human thought, expressed through animals. I think is definitely a way that makes people think and think differently.
Andy, I was very keen to have you on the show today. I'm so glad you came on because you've exceeded all my expectations and really enjoyed talking to you, listening to you. And congratulations on your film. I think it's not just a movie, I think it's quite an important thing you've done. So, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Ryan. It's lovely to meet you.